Yeah. And it's a network of sort of weaker ties. So
Yes.
All right, it looks like we have most of our people in the audience. Are we ready to get started? All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending the May edition of the NNIP Idea Showcase. Very excited about our 4 speakers today. But before we get into that, I'll turn it over to Kathy for some general NNIP updates.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Pettit, if I haven't met everyone yet. Do you want to go to the first slide? We just have a couple of slides. The one to just give a quick update on our strategic framework, where Lee and I are very excited about where we're landing. And thanks to the incredible support by the Strategic Planning Committee and the Executive Committee. Our next sharing session, we'll send out an announcement, will be like the 3rd week of June. And we'll have sort of the framework. And thank you much to anyone who attended the town hall. That was really good, broad feedback for us to get to help us refine and improve the direction that we were going on. So these 4 pieces, including goals and strategies, which will be sort of the framework for fundraising and activities and planning for the next 3 years. So you can just take a look with that. If you are dying to have updates or want to chime in beforehand, please just reach out one-on-one. We're happy to connect with anyone before then if you are really interested in the process. Next, I sent a note around to the Google group. We did realize that there's been some not always cross-referencing. So there is a partners Google group. If any of you who are here are not on it, reach out to us and we can fix that. But I sent a note around about Google Doc conference sheet to list where NNIP partners are headed this year. If there's a chance to meet up, if there's a chance to promote NNIP while you're there. So this is something we did before COVID that I remembered and brought back. In June, Elizabeth and Leah have been working on an update to diversity of NNIP survey. So this asked for the staff and board and project advisory boards about race, gender, country of origin or country of birth and age to get us, that was amazingly 5 years ago already. So we want to get some updated data on that as we think about training and peer learning around diversity and both in hiring and retention of staff. So that should be coming in June, and along with our traditional buddy copy pairing. So we know the last meeting was in October and not everyone could attend, and it was a while ago. So we'll be sending out last time we did opt out. So we brought most people brought in and asked you to reach out to another staff person in another city to chat and get to know each other a little one-on-one, since it's hard to get that interaction in these big webinars. The next idea showcase Cole has organized is in August 31st. So thank you to him for doing this one. But if you have something that you think that will be that you have coming out, please let us know. You can volunteer at any time, not just when we do the call sometime in July. And then update on the partners conference, which we had hoped for earlier fall, but needed to postpone for some internal reasons. So we're in the midst of checking in for early November. The current site, what we need to verify with David, who's probably on the call, we are looking at Oakland, their 35th anniversary in California, and also our interest in sort of expanding on the West Coast and meeting some maybe potential partners out there. So we will send, we're checking into hotels right now and should be sending a save the date in the next week or two. And I'm going to turn it over to Leah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Leah Hendy, co-director of NNIP with Kathy, and I'm excited all of you could join us today. I'm thrilled to have the honor of announcing this year's G. Thomas Kingsley Impact Award winner. The Impact Award recognizes an NNIP partner organization for their important contributions to using neighborhood data to improve local policy and practice to benefit people with low incomes and communities of color. The award is named in honor of Tom Kingsley, the founding director of NNIP. And for those of you who didn't get to meet Tom, he spent decades inspiring organizations to democratize data and documenting the impact of partners across the country. He was a mentor to generations of researchers and local practitioners, and his mentorship has helped improve urban areas across the country. And if you want to learn more about Tom's legacy, I think Kathy might have dropped a link in the chat. Our 2023 award winner is our Chicago partner, the Institute for Housing Studies at DePaul University, for their analysis of the 2 to 4 unit housing stock that informed their collaborations with several community organizations and whose advocacy efforts resulted in multiple policy changes to help preserve this critical supply of affordable housing in Chicago. We know Tom would have loved this example of how data can be used to highlight an issue and reshape public policy. And the references we spoke with emphasized that the Institute for Housing Studies team's ability to translate the data and analysis for different audience levels to work as true collaborators with community organizations and to integrate stories from community leaders and residents with the quantitative data in a compelling way. And I want to invite Jeff Smith, the executive director of IHS, to come share more about their work on this issue. And congratulations, we'll be sending you the official award plaque in the mail. And then following Jeff's presentation and any questions, Cole will introduce the rest of our speakers for today.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you guys for this award. We don't ever get awards, so this is fun. You know, especially coming from NNIP, because I know there's so much great work happening in the network. So it's a really great honor. Thank you. And I want to acknowledge a bunch of staff who joined us this meeting: Sarah, Amador, Lily, Evelyn. Thank you guys for all your work. So I don't know if I have share my screen here. Yes, I can. So I'm just going to walk through some examples of what we have done on this topic, and kind of explain what it is that what 2 to 4 unit buildings are, and how we got interested in this topic. So basically, this issue and our interest in this issue emerged from conversations with community partners. This is, you know, community partners in a number of different neighborhood market contexts came to us and said, hey, we're losing 2 to 4 unit buildings for various reasons, but we don't really have the data to back it up and to talk to our aldermen, our foundations, our communities to explain and raise awareness of the issue. So we dug into the administrative data that we work with in different ways to help to see if we could highlight the importance of the stock to the overall affordable housing stock and to homeownership, quantify the ways it was being lost in different market contexts, and then connect that information to different policy conversations and initiatives to support strategies to promote investment and preservation of this type of housing. So what is this? I mean, I don't know. We call it 2 to 4 unit buildings in Chicago. I think other places probably call it something different. It's not super uncommon, but it tends to be a pretty significant part of the housing stock in many Chicago neighborhoods. In some neighborhoods in the city, it makes up over 70%. So units in 2 to 4s can be over 70% of the housing units in certain neighborhoods. It's iconic. You know, you see if you ever come to Chicago and you walk around, you'll see these buildings everywhere. They're very old. The median age is 108 years old. And most critically to us and to our partners, they make up what, you know, the backbone of the lower cost rental stock in most neighborhoods. Some people call it the naturally occurring affordable housing stock, but 2 to 4s really are a critical component of that stock. And they offer some unique qualities. For example, they tend to offer lower rents, and lower income households tend to be renters in these units. They provide family-sized units, meaning there are multiple bedrooms, which is increasingly rare in many neighborhoods. They are a predominant type of housing in the city's Black and Latino communities, so they provide housing to homeowners and renters of color. And they tend to be owned by small-scale mom-and-pop type landlords or owner-occupants, so they provide wealth building opportunities for both those owners and owner occupants. And something we've been increasingly looking into is they provide a pathway to home ownership, especially in the city's Black and Latino neighborhoods, because they offer opportunities to defray housing costs through rental income, provide multi-generational housing opportunities for families. So they really fill a very unique role. And I think the last item here is most critical, is that once you lose them, they're almost impossible to replace. No one's building 2 to 4 unit buildings anymore, especially as rental housing. They're very rare. You either have single family homes or as owner occupied housing or large multifamily rental buildings. And these 2 to 4 unit properties are not easy to replace. And so that's, adds some urgency to the preservation efforts. This slide is just a quick encapsulation of what's been happening in Chicago. And I'm guessing probably something that's happening in many cities this is the change in the rental housing stock in the city between 2012 and 2021. You see a big growth in 50+ units and 50+ unit rental buildings, and a loss, especially in smaller buildings. Looking particularly at that 2 to 4 unit stock, the city lost 10.7% between 2012 and in 2021. When we dug into this further, we saw that really that neighborhood real estate market context was pretty important in terms of understanding the pressures on the stock in higher cost neighborhoods. We noticed increasing demand for single family homes from high income households, high income families who wanted to be in the city, they wanted to be near urban amenities, but also didn't want to live in a rental building and have someone living above them. So what happened is that you see developers or individuals buying these homes and converting them into single family homes. In moderate cost areas, they are more likely to function as rental housing still, but because they're unsubsidized, typically the rents are unsubsidized, there's no guarantee at affordability. And as units turn over and new buyers purchase those properties, the risk is that the affordability offered in those rental units will be eroded. And then in lower cost areas, these are areas with long histories of disinvestment, population loss, and we saw properties really being lost, demolition. And once you lose them again, they're not being built again, and it really presents a potential barrier to reinvestment in neighborhoods where that type of demolition is happening. So this is just a slide to show across these market types, the share of parcels lost, 2 to 4 unit parcels lost between 2013 and 2019, citywide. 4.2% of the city's 2 to 4 unit parcels were lost. That loss was greatest in the higher cost neighborhoods. One element of this work was understanding the relationship of this loss to proximity to transit. Transit's obviously a significant amenity. And what we saw here was that in all market contexts, there was a more rapid loss of 2 to 4 unit properties within a half a mile of a CTA station. So in high cost areas, for example, areas near transit lost 7.5% of their 2 to 4 unit stock compared to 6.5% for areas not near transit. So that added additional urgency to the issue of proximity to transit, because in an era where you're trying to build density near transit, you're losing it actually through this type of transformation. And this is to give a sense of what's happening to these properties. And again, the market context matters. In high cost areas, you saw the prominent type of activity is loss of these 2 to 4s to single family homes. Almost 80% of the properties lost to single family homes are in high cost areas. And on the flip side, areas lost to non-residential uses, typically vacant land, were in lower cost neighborhoods. And again, just to kind of drill in on the proximity to transit, over 50% of the properties lost to single family homes were in high cost areas near transit. And then on the flip side, unfortunately, 35%, the plurality of properties lost to vacant land, were also near transit, but in lower cost areas, which represents a significant lost opportunity. So what happened? The city, as part of some advocacy and outreach efforts, we recognized this was an issue and started to do some policy work. The first set of initiatives were really targeted pilot ordinances to 2 neighborhoods near that were experiencing gentrification pressures. The first ordinance was really a demolition ban to prevent the demolition of these properties. And then they updated, that was a temporary 6-month moratorium on demos. And then they wanted to do that to sort of buy some time to actually think up some actual policy. And so they updated that with changes to a zoning ordinance that was piloted again in these 2 neighborhoods, and essentially established minimum density requirements in areas. It's very targeted, very specific in areas that were currently zoned for some type of multifamily housing, and whose block was majority multifamily. So if it was majority single family, you could still deconvert a property with, by right essentially. But in these multifamily areas that were zoned multifamily, to do so, you had to request a zoning change, which is an administrative process that the city could then deny, essentially, to slow down this loss of this type of housing. Recently, last year, the city passed what's called the Connected Communities Ordinance, which is a big ordinance, covered a lot of different things. It was an update to the city's transit-oriented development policy. And one of the key things that relates to this issue was that it included an expansion of this the anti-deconversion protections. I really don't like the term anti-deconversion. There's like some kind of double negative going on there, but that's the term that they use, so I'm going to stick with it. And essentially, it expands the geographies covered by this protection to, again, very specific, but near transit, high density, multifamily zoned in gentrifying neighborhoods. And those gentrifying neighborhoods are these, what are they calling, community preservation areas, red areas on this map. So, those are areas that are pretty well served by transit. So there is protection, our significant number of properties being protected. We didn't map out all the areas in these very narrow band of, multifamily zoned areas near transit, but in general, this is these preservation areas in that middle bar, 20,000 plus parcels, 2 to 4 unit parcels are near transit in these preservation areas. So there's theoretically a protection on some of those units as part of this ordinance. What's next? We're continuing to do work on this topic. Focus on supporting existing owners. Existing owners are a really important resource. So thinking about how to target rehab grants or property tax relief to these owners so they're not pressured to sell. In the case that they are pressured to sell or do feel like they want to sell, trying to figure out ways to connect them to less profit motivated owners who might want to keep those units affordable and not convert them into single family homes or higher cost rental housing. And then also just thinking about opportunities for new owner occupants. We just put out a report looking at the fact that Black and Latino home buyers are more likely to purchase 2 to 4 unit buildings than other types of home buyers in Chicago. But the challenge is really on the supply side, where there aren't enough of them to, for sale. It's kind of a challenge in the housing market in general, but in particular on this part of the stock. And as I noted previously, you lost a lot of these buildings through demolition. So just trying to think through strategies to preserve and rebuild this type of housing in neighborhoods across the city. So that's a quick summary of our work. Thank you guys again for the award. We're really honored. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeff, and congratulations again on receiving the Impact Award this year. Congrats to you and your team. Does anyone have any questions for Jeff?
Jeff, in those low-cost markets, what percentage of the housing units are 2 to 4 housing? Or what percentage of the people live in those? Is it 50% or 30% or 80%?
Recording in progress.
That's a good question. I don't know that I have that number off the top of my head. I know that in some neighborhoods, for example, up to 70% live in 2 to 4 unit of the housing stock is in 2 to 4 unit buildings. So I can, while all the other folks are presenting, I can track down a link to a source on this, but it is a plurality in many neighborhoods, a majority in some, but a plurality in general. So it's the most common type of rental housing in the city, even though it's been lost.
Jeff, I think, I don't know if Noah's on, but the Detroit folks on their Black Wealth project are working on some tricky financing they have for like housing that needs renovation. But I don't know if there's any other banks thinking about or CDFIs, or I don't know, like interesting on the finance side about how to help landlords get rehab loans or help people, like you said, start in and actually purchase things before the cash investors can come in. Or
yeah, there's been a lot of conversation on the rehab side. There have been a couple of CDFIs locally have created forgivable loans or rehab grants essentially for lower mod home property owners in gentrifying neighborhoods. unfortunately, not enough of those to go around to meet the demand, but it is a pilot, I think, that can be replicated, and there's a lot of interest in figuring out how to scale those types of programs up. There is a lot of conversations around acquisition funds to target the acquisition of these properties before they, if they hit the market, it gets tricky. So how do you get ahead of the market in some cases? I know Milwaukee actually has something similar, I believe, that some folks are trying to do. But that's an example of it. And then there are, programs to try to create catalytic investment opportunities in certain neighborhoods and build two flats on vacant land as part of a broader reinvestment strategy and disinvested communities to try to really attract and retain population in those neighborhoods. So there's definitely lots of stuff happening in that space. It's always a resource question in some cases, but I do think there's a lot of interest and momentum on the topic.
Cool. Yeah, if other people have other examples, definitely share them on the Google group, and we can start to sort of identify the body of work in this space.
All right. If there are no more questions for Jeff, I think we'll move along to our next speaker, which is David Harris from the Urban Strategies Council in Oakland. David will be presenting on the Oakland General Plan's Youth Research Program, and he'll be presenting with a couple of the youth fellows, Jocelyn Gama and Jacob Burgess. So I'll turn it over to David.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where in the country you are. I'm David Harris, the president of Urban Strategies Council. I wanted to basically introduce the conversation here today about Oakland's general plan update. Oakland hasn't updated their general plan for 20 years, and the state has now mandated that every large municipality in California update their plans, and as well as including new elements to their the master plan regarding environmental justice and safety and other components. At Urban Strategies, we're part of a collaboration that applied to lead the community outreach and engagement in neighborhoods that have been historically underrepresented in the city's planning process, namely the Black and Brown communities of the Flatlands and Oakland. And we have put together a collaboration of 13 anchor community organizations representing numerous different constituencies in the city, but really organized around the concept of using the arts as a vehicle for community engagement and civic planning. The organizations each do major cultural events like Cinco de Mayo or Dia de los Muertos or the Malcolm X Jazz Festival and Lunar New Year. And it's at these large events where we're concentrating our outreach efforts. And Urban Strategies Council is responsible specifically for the youth component of the outreach. We have approximately 15 youth fellows who have been hired, who are going out and not only going to these activities and engaging in survey, outreach, interviews, and so forth, but they're also doing their own events and programs. Those, the young people, roughly half college students, half well, a little more than half high school students. And they're led by two of our senior youth fellows, Jocelyn Gama and Jacob Burgess. And I'm just doing this introduction because they're the ones doing the work, and I'm going to let them just highlight right now, what they're doing. So I'll turn it over to Jocelyn and Jacob.
Thank you, David. Yes, hello everyone. And I mean, we're talking about Oakland, and today is 510 Day, and that is the area code. And today, you know, the Lake Merritt, I don't know if you guys may be familiar, but I know it's this place where all across the world. But today, Oakland, we're celebrating 510 Day, and so the whole Oakland Bay area is coming together at a lake. It's called Lake Merritt. And we're gonna be there today, but just to basically, and we're exactly what David just mentioned, we're gonna be embodying that today at the lake. But just to tell you guys a little bit more, you know, there's a lot of ways in which we conduct research. We've adopted two methodologies, which one is White Plan, and the other one is also White PAR research. And so White Plan, it's a youth plan, learn, and act now, and that's basically a K through 12 civic youth engagement strategy developed by the UC Berkeley Centers for Cities and Schools. And it basically brings young people into the heart of city planning processes, enabling them to tackle like real world challenges in their communities. And, you know, YPAR is another methodology in which we use. And so, yeah, like the fellows are learning the importance of identifying solutions through presentations, social media campaigns, conducting new engagement strategies for our peers and those in middle school, high school, and college. And like right now, as David mentioned, and I'm gonna just say a little bit and I'll pass it on because I know we have a couple minutes. And I'm really passionate about the work that we do, so I can go on and go on. But, you know, as David said, art is the vehicle for this work that we're doing. It's been a personal transformation, a way to civically engage, you know, the youth, and not just the youth, but also like intergenerational communities. So right now within the Oakland General Plan update, we're the housing element just passed. And so right now we're working on the environment and safety plan, where fellows are they've been helping develop like a digital treat activity. So that's where the art component comes in. And, you know, COVID has impacted our ability to do in-person outreach. However, like these community events like today definitely like help us do this outreach, and we've been, you know, using art. And throughout this panel, definitely like later, I'll definitely talk about and a way in which we did community outreach, engagement, and research with an event called Paint and Educate. And I'll pass it over to Jacob so he can share anything that I possibly missed as of now.
So thank you so much, Jocelyn, for the introduction and breaking down some of the work that we do. And just to further expound upon some of the things that Jocelyn said, the biggest goal for us with the Oakland General Plan and our youth is to emphasize the importance of amplifying our community's voice. You know, we like to consider ourselves like the megaphone for the community when we go into Oakland, and allow ourselves to be the ones that get their message out so that the changes that they want can actually happen. So one of the things that we developed and have begun implementing when we go to different events is our own version of the Oakland General Plan survey, which we ask some brief questions about some different issues and things that people have seen in their communities in Oakland, from the various potholes, the illegal dumping, some of the unsafe and inconvenient transportation issues. And we've added that to this survey so that the community and the members of Oakland can, voice their opinions, but also offer solutions. That's one thing that we teach our fellows, is that if we're going to be doing this work, it's so important that we're solution oriented. So in every survey that we have, whenever we're doing video interviews, we're always making sure that all of the questions, everything is aimed toward a positive outcome and something that we can do to change. So, and some of the different things that we've done as far as with our outreach is we've had the fellows participate in, like I mentioned, surveys, which we do these either physically by paper, or we've even made a QR code so that whenever we go to different public events, it's easy for the community to just scan it on their phone and fill out the survey, and then we get the information to our database. And then we also like to introduce video interviews, which I feel like is really more beneficial to me, because it connects a face with the community that we're seeing. It's like, of course, you can read 100 different survey responses and be like, okay, we get an idea for what the people want. But it's not until you see that video of that little girl or see that video of that older man saying that things have been the same for 25, 30 years and when are things going to be different, that I think people are truly going to be affected. So that's also leads me to our social media campaign. And that's actually something that we're really, really excited about right now, especially with creative expression and everything being on the rise. We have two aspects to our social media campaign. So the first aspect is the more educational and informative aspect, which is where we'll be breaking down the ins and outs of each of the different parts of the Oakland General Plan elements. So as of right now, we're on environmental justice and safety. So it'll be like different facts and different things you can know about the environmental justice and safety elements. But then we also have the creative expression aspect to our social media campaign. And that's where we introduce the idea of the I am poem. And the I am poem is pretty much what the fellows have all come up with. Every fellow has written their own version of our I am poem. And it's pretty much your definition and what you see when you and your experience living in the city of Oakland and some of the things that you've seen and some of the things that you've wanted to change is what it really means to be from Oakland and to be an Oaklander. So with this poem, we've actually developed a workshop where we were able to go and teach even other youth what it means to be from Oakland and how you can even express yourself and why that even matters. And that's something that our fellows are actually really, really excited about. So far, we've had some fellows take videos and post to our Instagram, but we actually are in the planning of hosting workshops and allowing for ourselves to get in spaces with other youth and teach them how to write their I am poems. So we have a lot in the works for the Oakland General Plan. We definitely attend a lot of community events. Like as Jocelyn mentioned, today we'll be at 510 Day today, tabling, marching, and one of our very own fellows, Joshua Hankerson, is actually going to be sharing his I am poem in front of all of Oakland today for 510 Day. So we're very, very excited for our fellows. You know, they've taken a lot of steps in this direction. You know, we remember when we were started off just training them, they had no idea what the Oakland General Plan was, how many elements there were, what even year it was going to be finished. And now we have them teaching workshops, passing out information, and conducting video interviews and surveys as experts on the Oakland General Plan. So very proud for our fellows, very proud for the work that we're going to be doing. And I know y'all are going to be hearing about what we have coming up very, very soon.
Just to add on to what Jacob just said, yeah, Joshua Hankerson, he'll be presenting his poem and also be talking about like the youth outreach engagement work that we've been doing and how they can, you know, it's going to be a great way in which Oakland, because right now it's going to be like over 20,000 people at the lake. It's going to be a lot of people. I don't know if you guys have heard about this in the past previous years, but it is literally like a historical thing. And so yeah, he's literally gonna have the opportunity to be on the mic and say this stuff to like this many people to talk about like, hey, I am Joshua, I am an OGP fellow, I'm an Urban Strategies fellow, I am doing the youth engagement outreach regarding the Oakland General Plan. You know, here's a way in which you can stay connected. We're gonna be having surveys, we're gonna have the digital tree, and yeah.
Very cool. How does the information that you're collecting get back to the planners and the, you know, city official people writing the plan?
So when we conduct our surveys, especially with the ones on the QR code and the Google surveys, we're able to just immediately, the responses are updated. So then we share that with the other 13 organizations in our collaborative, just cities being the main person for data collection. And then that's how we're able to share our research and the different things that we've been able to collect. And then if we have a physical survey, your boy very own Jacob Burgess is the one that enters them physically. So say if we have physical surveys that we bring to events, we'll collect them back, and then I'll spend long hours at the office, you know, making sure we enter them into the into our software. You feel me? So into our online presence, if that makes sense.
And once the data is compiled and analyzed, we monthly report to the city on the feedback we've gotten from community, as well as the policy recommendations for each of the general plan updates. And it's called Oakland 2045. And I don't have the Instagram site to put in the chat, but if Jocelyn or Jacob, if you have it.
I can.
You can send it later.
Well, thank you all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That's a lot of really impressive work. So thank you. Thank you to all three of y'all for sharing about it. All right. I think in the interest of time, we're gonna go ahead and move on to our
Wait.
next speaker.
Did Jacob have one more thing to say? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, my fault. I just I have to do a little shameless plug real quick. Just want to let y'all know me and Jocelyn also are spoken word poets in our own honor. So, you know, we are definitely looking to represent our organization in any kind of way possible. So if y'all are looking for youth voice to come and speak about topics that you feel like could, you know, change the lives of youth in your area or adults in your area, me and Jocelyn are down for it. Like that's what we do. Like I said, we are the megaphone for community. And we got some big mouths, you feel me? Spitting that spoken word. So definitely please contact us and let us know if you need any youth voice, because we are that.
And I mean, yes, just to like, you know, lastly say, I think that the work that we're doing within the Oakland General Plan and this deeply rooted fellowship, I really just want to emphasize and highlight how we're really bridging art and civic engagement and research. And, you know, sometimes when we're talking about research, it's really important to meet people where they're at, to find creative ways in which we can find, you know, new findings, new measures. You know, society is changing, so is humanity. And so I just really like to highlight that that's how Urban Strategies definitely has been, you know, conducting research. And it's definitely a great model in which, you know, other organizations can definitely carry on. Because the work that we do, you know, we're talking about injustice work, we're talking about harmful work that definitely can be triggering to people. And even if I say this, it gives me the chill because it's definitely real. And so we're just trying to come and find solutions. And so I just really appreciate, and I'm like so grateful to be in a space here and talking about the work. And I talk about this with pride because art is really a way in which art is cultural as well, you know? And so it's about finding those different pillars in research that can definitely bring a collective genius for, you know, all of the work that we are collectively doing for the betterment of society. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely very powerful. Okay, well, again, thank you to Urban Strategies. So we're going to move on to our next speaker, which is Jennifer Newcomer from the Colorado Futures Center.
Hi, good morning, afternoon. All right, can y'all see my slide? So yeah, thank you. I was supposed to present this in February and I had a little child sickness emergency on the day of. So thanks for letting me sneak in this month to share some work that we wrapped up. At least I would say as like a phase one, the end of last year, that was focused around this idea of quantifying displacement in the community. It was something that grew out of some work I had the opportunity to support a few years ago with the SPARK initiative. For the folks familiar with SPARK, it's the Strong, Prosperous, and Resilient Communities Challenge. You know, Memphis and LA, and I'm gonna completely miss the other cities. Denver was one of the cities nationally that were part of that work, and it was focused around racial equity, climate equity, and health equity, within also a lens around displacement in the community. And so in any event, this sort of grew legs out of that work. And it was really something that we had heard from the community. And this was just a collection of 9 neighborhoods in Southwest Denver that had come forward through that process and asked, well, can you tell us how many people have had to leave our community And it was one of those moments as a researcher, like sheer terror kind of went through my body because like, how are we going to quantify that? In any event, this is this like latest iteration of trying to refine and hone in on something that can be paired with the stories and the experiences and the communities that are disproportionately impacted by displacement through the negative effects of gentrification. And so with that, we embarked on a little bit of this hierarchy here of developing in this measure and establishing some sort of an adjusted metric that has this sort of established relationship with vulnerability around displacement, and understanding what role of association do other socioeconomic characteristics within the community and real estate related variables have with this new adjusted moves measure. Within that context, just to be clear, we recognize there's all kinds of other mobility, just literally physically moves, not necessarily, not talking about like socioeconomic mobility, but just physical mobility moves from place to place and how that intersects with socioeconomic characteristics. That we focus specifically on this lower right-hand quadrant around those who are most vulnerable and are experiencing the disruptions of involuntary moves. So in the friendliness of NNIP, get to talk about the geeky aspects of what administrative data sources that we explored and what we ultimately honed in on after kind of thinking through what could we get to in terms of being able to leverage a data source that would allow us to do essentially the skip tracing analysis. We honed in on student enrollment records and voter records. The prior work that I had done with Spark specifically just used student enrollment records, and that worked fine because we were just looking within the context of a handful of neighborhoods. Now that we were looking across the city, it got a little bit trickier because we invariably have had questions around, well, where do people end up moving to if they move? And with the student enrollment records from the district, the Denver boundary, the school district is one and the same for those who aren't familiar. Once they left the district, we don't know if they left the state or if they just moved to the neighboring city. With the voter records, we have more insight around that because we have statewide. And so through our analysis to try to understand what's going to put us in the best position long-term, considering the realities of accessing these different data sources, we ended up landing on the voter records for sort of this longer strengths list that's in here. And even knowing we were foregoing an economic variable with the student records, with the FRL flags, but also understanding we had a little bit more nuance around the ability to establish a more likely household count with the voter records and being able to essentially access their data a little bit easier than having to go through robust data sharing agreements with the student records. And so just mapping out the straight moves results in basically a map of where we have the predominance of renters in the community. So we can see this relationship across the city, highly correlated with that relationship, the share of renters, no matter the data. It was both testing, again, this is results from the student enrollment records and the voter records. And then when we looked at the dynamic with more the real estate related and economic related facets, we see this negative relationship with that strength of the mobility. And so we ended up constructing, where we landed was to construct the standard score approach. We looked at the input from the voter records as this as an unstable flag. Essentially, this share of the households that were unstable had experienced some kind of move over the period of time that entered positively, and then we offset that that positive entry with negative entry scores for median valuation of the properties. That was actually out of all of our property records, not ACS. We did use an ACS variable from the income side as well as from the share of renters. And so those three were set in negatively to offset those effects around the tenure. And so we ended up with this pattern, different than just mapping essentially the volume of moves previously. And this rang true for folks who may or may not be familiar with Denver. This rang much truer for us in terms of areas that are vulnerable to displacement through some of our other gentrification analysis. And it definitely dampened that association with renter, that more severe association with renters that we had previously. So when we ran the correlations with a host of different other indicators, we looked across BIPOC related variables and low income status, as well as some of these real estate related variables around investors, a proxy measure that we have also developed that we call, it's kind of a mouthful, this cost to replacement ratio. It's more of our proxy around quality. So we have a little more of a universal quality measure and property flips. And you can see here from just looking across the measure citywide that we don't really see an association with the real estate related variables. When we looked more discretely at the top quintile of that density of moves from the adjusted measure we developed, when we reran those results again with the real estate related variables, they popped up. So we can see that the investors have exhibited more of an association with that volume of moves, as well as that quality measure. Property flips still did not exhibit. In fact, the prior one, there was a negative association because they're have the negative sign on it. And that rang true with us just because a lot of the property flips in the area in the city have been in areas that had a much higher upside and much higher price point in terms of the real estate. So that ended up kind of debunking some thoughts that we had across our conversations with respect to property flips. And so this is what it looked like over time. And we had access to the voter records back to 2012, so we could start constructing it almost over a 10-year period. And seeing not only did they increase in moves, total moves over time, but that share of the base year households or our estimated households from the data source. And we have 2022's file, but we're still waiting on a property appraisal file that's been audited, so we can run the property valuation variable in that whole analysis. So we're cautionary around those results that are in the 2018 to 2020, just because we don't know if the quote move out was the end all be all move out because of COVID, or was it another motivation around moves that happened into 2020? So more to come, hopefully, and we have interest to run this across the 7-county metro so that we could start to integrate these data in with our property database that is supporting the housing preservation work that's happening in our region. So that is it.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Any questions?
We're a little short on time too, so just.
Yeah. If nobody has any, we might want to go ahead and move on to our speakers for anybody who has to leave right at the end of the hour. But yes, thank you again, Jennifer. It's a really detailed presentation. So it's very impressive. But yeah, so our last speaker, Charlie Bruner from Child Equity, I'll turn it over to him.
Hi, thanks very much. And I want to provide just kind of an overview of the work I've been doing. And I know it's something that's not going to be really new to you, but I really do think it's important in terms of using the Social Vulnerability Index. And really it is around in thinking that it currently is probably mostly misused, but potentially very powerful for focusing federal attention and resources. And I want to go through a little bit of the work here and how it may fit into your work at the NNIP. And I'm, of course, an emeritus member of NNIP. The CDC Social Vulnerability Index was developed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And it's often used in identifying geographies of particular concern in public health, but because it's out there and available, it's often used more broadly. And it's available at both the county level and the census tract level, and really easily downloadable and further analyzed. It's also fairly current. It really, the most recent SVI is for 2020 using 2016 to 2020 ACS data. And it's composed of 16 indicators from the American Community Survey, which have undergone a small change from previous times, but it includes a number of socioeconomic indicators. 150% of poverty replaced median family income and percent of poverty recently. Housing burden was added, and health insurance, no health insurance coverage, was added in as a specific indicator and measure. And then the ones in purple are the ones I'm going to concentrate on, particularly around socio-demographic indicators that are available through the SVI. And they also have 4 other housing measures, which are provided, but which I don't find particularly relevant for just getting a big picture. And then they have several demographic indicators, race, ethnicity, over 65, under 18, limited English proficiency, which I do want to go into as well. And my view of the SVI is it's not perfect as an overall indicator of social vulnerability or of resiliency or of poverty and underservice or underinvestment as far as what could be gleaned from the American survey, but it really is good enough to identify major areas of intention and really the why and the what around those major areas. In terms of broad level comparisons, the SVI identifies much the same counties as the new resilience indicator, the persistently poor county measure that has been used by Congress and the Black Caucus in terms of identifying counties for focus of attention for discretionary grants. And generally, it identifies the same counties as those other measures. The tract level analysis identifies much the same tracks as such indicators as the Child Opportunity Index and other child vulnerability indices that have been developed at the tract level. When you look at it, however, the county level analysis and the tract level analysis identify very different geographic areas. And in fact, only 30% of those tracts that are identified as the highest vulnerability are found in the county level analysis. And it probably would be about 10% if the Bronx hadn't been one of the counties that was identified. They are very disproportionately more rural counties, not large metropolitan areas. And the second thing I think is important is the tract level analysis. When you look at the top 10% of census tracts or top 10% of counties, the on an indicator by indicator basis, the vulnerability is much higher and is much more metropolitan and child focused by the tract level analysis, and really does beg, if you really want to get to where the issues and concerns and needs are from a vulnerability perspective, you've got to go below the county level. However, if used at the county level, or if just used as a composite measure and it's not examined by its elements, the resulting policies and actions can really miss the boat in both where we target and what we target people to do from where we target. Here is the comparison of the highest social vulnerability index counties and the highest census tracts with the US average on all these socioeconomic indicators: 150% of poverty, unemployed, housing burden, no high school diploma, single parent family, uninsured, and no car. And I do think that collectively they come to measure what we basically feel are the challenges of the lack of realized personal capital, economic capital, housing capital, and social capital in communities. And if you look at the highest vulnerability county data, they're about half again higher than the US average. But if you look at the tract level, they're about twice as high on average. That these are really much more vulnerable areas. And if we're wanting to target our resources, we really have to go down to the sub-county level to do that. And of course, that's the forte and the work that the NNIP has done. I've done this now it takes me about 2 hours to do it if I want to do a state on this, using this. And I've done it for states like Mississippi, Iowa, California, and Massachusetts, in very different parts of the country. And they all show up with a very similar breakout in terms of the state average looks one way, the highest vulnerability tracts look about half again higher, and the highest vulnerability, counties look about half again higher, and the highest vulnerability tracts represent about twice as high. The second thing that, and actually, I don't think these should be part of a measure of vulnerability. I think that these are background data, but they use them as a measure of vulnerability. What do the demographics look like in these neighborhoods and counties? And so the BIPOC population, as you see, it's much higher. It's more than twice as high in the highest vulnerability counties, but it is really the predominant population, averaging about 80% of all the people in those communities in those highest vulnerability census tracts. And the immigration and the nature of the population as measured by limited English proficiency again shows that this is just an area where there are people who are acquiring English as a language who are immigrants. And if you look at the demographics, and I work on child policy, but if you're going into these neighborhoods and thinking that the major focus has to be on seniors and their conditions and needs and the disparities in health inequities they face, you're missing the mark, because these neighborhoods are very much younger. They have high proportions of kids and young families. And if we're going to do something in these neighborhoods, we have to give particular attention there. So the highest vulnerability census tracts are not only very diverse, but they're racially and ethnically concentrated. And if we're thinking about adding additional staffing through things like community health workers, family development workers, community builders, or whatever, looking at the county level, one may say, well, we've got to have a good representation of people of color. At the census tract level, we really have to emphasize that we need to make sure that the voices and the background and the knowledge and experience of the community is heard. And we've got to make those types of investments in people of color and in and of the community. And also we have to give attention to what people care about in these communities. And given their age and the number of children, child focused activities and opportunities weigh much more heavily than where a lot of the resources are now going, which is around dealing with the senior population and the disability population. The current federal uses and limits is its SVI is often a source for identifying poor, high vulnerability, underserved communities in federal legislation and grants, but it's predominantly used at the county level and not the tract level. It's most often only the index itself is referenced and used, and not really looking at the demographics and the factors underneath it to really say, we have to do community building in these areas with children and families in mind. And at the federal level, often the grantees or states are asked to add additional information without even using what's there in the SVI, which can give those broader indicators. And therefore, people spend a lot of time and energy trying to collect other data that doesn't really get to where they need to go. And I put in red that using the county level data in particular reinforces kind of a comfortable myth that rural areas are the places where policies need to focus attention and resources in overcoming social economic disadvantage and vulnerability exists. It's not we ignore rural areas, but we have, if we do direct resources there, we miss where the deepest vulnerability is and where the most people are really experiencing that social vulnerability. Well, in terms of, I run over, but in terms of roles for NNIP, I mean, I think educating state leaders and educating members of Congress on really the importance of county level.
Just to know, but we're about 5 minutes over if you want to give out.
The support, but really is working to support communities in using this core set and then provide additional assistance in other data. And I think that this has particular applicability when states are doing community health, when hospitals are doing community health needs assessments, and stressing that promoting racial equity includes a geographic analysis that shows where there are concentrations of BIPOC populations, and that we need to really focus on how we reduce the distance between the service community and its configuration and who the people are living there.
Definitely. Thanks, Charlie. Sorry we ran out of time. We were wondering whether we should move to 3 presentations instead of 4 since we didn't give enough time for people to chat. But Cole will send around the video and the PowerPoints. And if folks want to continue, I know Charlie and Jennifer, you know, are interested in these topics longer term. So if people want to continue the conversations around measuring displacement or how we can get involved in the making sure funding goes to the most needy places, definitely, you know, express interest individually or through the group, and we'll find ways to do that. I'll turn it back to you, Cole.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so like Kathy said, I'll be around shortly to distribute the slides from our speakers today. And also I'll have the full recording up on the NNIP website. So I'll share that with the Google group. But until then, thank you everyone for participating in this showcase, and we hope to see you next time in August.